aussi, c'est qu'on a plusieurs personnes comme moi, comme Désiré Yamoulémier, comme Eddy, qui est devant moi, où on a vu les nôtres partir sans jamais avoir... on a toujours des questions sans réponse. Et c'est finalement ça qui fait que, quelque part, il y a des choses qui reviennent. Ça veut dire que 72, moi 94, puis après 94, il y a d'autres cycles qui sont venus, même aujourd'hui, des gens qui partent. Et finalement, on ne les revoit plus. Et finalement, c'est normalisé alors que ça ne devrait pas être normalisé. Donc, pour moi, j'ai essayé, parce que ça a pris du temps, mais en étant journaliste, ça m'a aidé, moi, de réfléchir sur la question. Comment, en étant victime, on devient une survivante. Mais maintenant, moi, je trouve que je suis une résistante, dans le sens où je refuse aujourd'hui que ce qui m'est arrivé, qui est difficile, qui est un traumatisme, soit le moteur de ma vie. Aujourd'hui, c'est comment je m'en suis sortie qui doit être le moteur pour reconstruire le Burundi, finalement la région et le monde. Parce que l'état de victime, c'est très facile d'être là-dedans. On se complaît là-dedans, on accuse l'autre, et c'est très facile parce que finalement, on ne vous demande pas grand-chose. La force de reconstruire, parce que finalement, quand on vous pose la question, non, moi je suis victime. Oui, mais la victimisation va partir quand ? Parce que, par exemple, aujourd'hui, vous entendrez des gens qui disent « Moi, je suis orphelin de 72 ou de 65. » Donc, vous êtes déjà marié, vous avez des enfants. Comment pouvez-vous vous positionner comme un orphelin alors que vous avez déjà aujourd'hui des responsabilités ? Malheureusement, c'est ça que nous vivons et c'est ça qui enfreint finalement la consolidation de la paix. Parce que nos pays, finalement, au moment où on allait consolider la paix, c'est le moment justement où on revient aux problèmes anciens parce qu'on n'a pas pris le temps d'entrer profondément sur qu'est-ce qui a fait qu'on en soit ici aujourd'hui. Comment se fait-il qu'aujourd'hui on parle de 72 alors qu'on est en 2022? C'est qu'il y a un problème profond qu'on n'a pas réglé. Moi, j'ai pu m'en sortir. M'en sortir, ça veut dire que j'ai considéré que ce qui m'est arrivé, bien sûr, le drame dans tout ça, c'est que perdre quelqu'un, ça peut arriver à tout le monde, mais ne pas enterrer la personne perdue, c'est très compliqué. Parce que finalement, comment on fait le deuil? Finalement, comment on quitte d'une situation? Moi, je suis victime, j'ai fait mon deuil, j'ai perdu quelqu'un. Ah, maintenant, c'est fini, je dois passer à autre chose. Désiré Yamoulémier l'a bien dit, à un moment, c'est bon, maintenant, on doit passer à autre chose. Mais comment nous, on passe à autre chose, puisqu'on n'a jamais vu. On a un bon jour, on s'est levé, quelqu'un est venu prendre les notes qui nous étaient chères, on ne les a plus revues. Comment on passe à autre chose? D'abord, comment on sait qu'ils sont morts? Mais finalement, moi, comme Désiré Yamoulémier, moi, la question qui revient maintenant, je pense que c'est... On a une discussion souvent avec Eddy aussi, c'est pas qui a fait ça. C'est aujourd'hui, moi, franchement, c'est si je pouvais, quelqu'un pouvait me dire aujourd'hui, voilà, c'est ici qu'on a enterré les restes de ton père, ça, ce serait vraiment quelque chose qui est extraordinaire pour moi. Parce que finalement, je pourrais dire, voilà, on ne sait pas comment on est, on ne sait pas comment on va mourir, mais finalement, ce qui est important, c'est la dignité quand on peut enterrer les nôtres. C'est cette dignité finalement qu'on nous enlève. On nous enlève cette dignité et ce qui est dommage aussi, c'est qu'après, la politique vient se mêler de notre douleur. Ce qui devait être notre douleur devient une douleur régionale, une douleur nationale, parce que tout le monde veut politiser ça. Ça veut dire qu'aujourd'hui, que ce soit en RDC, au Burundi, au Rwanda, partout dans plusieurs pays, nous vivons des choses terribles, mais la politique vient nous enlever notre moment de deuil, notre moment où on devait faire un travail sur nous. C'est le moment où la politique va entrer là-dedans, va commencer à politiser ce qui nous arrive. Et moi, je trouve que c'est un problème aujourd'hui. Pourquoi on n'arrive pas à se sortir de ça? Parce que finalement, la politique se mêle de ce qui devait d'abord être notre douleur et notre chemin pour s'en sortir. Ça, c'est un. Deux. C'est parce que justement, après, quand il y a eu des négociations, quand il y a un accord, on vient nous dire maintenant c'est fini, tout va bien, la paix est là, mais on ne prend pas la peine de savoir, oui, vous êtes parti négocier entre partis politiques, entre des leaders, mais vous n'êtes jamais revenu pour savoir comment nous vivons d'abord l'accord que vous avez signé. Quel est notre sentiment, nous qui ont eu des traumatismes? Est-ce que vous savez ce que nous vivons? Est-ce que d'abord, dans votre accord, vous avez tenu compte de nos peines, de nos traumatismes? Parce que quand vous revenez, vous allez travailler avec nous. L'accord ne va pas fonctionner entre juste ceux qui ont signé. L'accord, ce sera avec nous. Mais nous, blessés, nous, avec des traumas, quand on va me demander quelque chose, c'est d'abord mon trauma. Moi, je vais fonctionner avec mon trauma. Tu vas me demander de m'asseoir avec Désiré, mais Désiré, pour moi, aujourd'hui, il représente soit la rébellion, c'est ça qui s'est passé au Burundi, il représente l'armée en qui j'ai jamais eu confiance. Mais tu veux, parce que l'accord a été signé, tout va bien, retourner à votre travail, mais ça ne fonctionne pas comme ça. C'est pourquoi j'avais même posé la question au journaliste Eddy qui était devant, la consolidation de la paix. Oui, mais on fait comment? Est-ce qu'elle peut être consolidée? Est-ce qu'elle est là d'abord? Parce que c'est ça, on nous parle de paix, parce qu'on a signé des accords, la paix est là. Parce que la paix du cœur, c'est ça qui manque. La paix du cœur n'est jamais là, et c'est ça les drames que nous vivons. La paix du cœur, on fait comme si on n'a pas besoin de ça, alors que non. Moi, avec tous les habits que je porte ici, avec les costumes, avec tout ce que vous pouvez voir ici, les blessures et les cicatrices que nous cachons derrière tout ce que nous portons, c'est ça qui parle. Ce n'est pas les costumes, ce n'est pas la voix, c'est ça ce que nous essayons de cacher, ce qui est à l'intérieur, c'est ça qui parle. Et comment vous voulez faire la paix avec ce qu'on a caché? Parce qu'on va venir ici bien habillé, mais c'est l'habit qui va parler, ce n'est pas les cicatrices que nous cachons derrière ces habits qui vont parler. Et malheureusement, c'est ça le problème. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, ce qu'il faut faire, c'est de laisser ces cicatrices vraiment guérir. Parce que si on ne laisse pas ces cicatrices, ces plaies guéries, on aura un problème. On aura des gens qui iront toujours compte que finalement, ce qui nous a profondément blessés, c'est la force aujourd'hui qu'on a. Parce que finalement, on est légitime. Moi, je dis toujours à ceux qui ont pris mon père, oui, j'étais une gamine, mais aujourd'hui, je suis une adulte, parce que c'est ça que je dis souvent. À un moment, tu es un enfant, mais quand tu deviens adulte, tu dois réfléchir aussi avec une certaine maturité. Oui, j'ai été une gamine qu'on a blessée, à laquelle on a pris son père. Je n'ai jamais eu de réponse à mes questions. Mais je suis aujourd'hui une femme qui peut transformer cette société. Je suis une femme qui refuse que le politique vienne me dire comment je dois me comporter pour gérer ma douleur, ou gérer le conflit, ou gérer tout ce qui se passe dans mon pays. Ma douleur, ou gérer le conflit, ou gérer tout ce qui se passe dans mon pays. Je suis une femme qui peut changer cette société. Je suis une femme qu'on a voulu blesser, mais qui finalement est aujourd'hui ici, devant vous, pour dire on peut s'en sortir. On a notre voix, on peut faire des choses à notre manière, pas pour détruire, mais avec une vision à long terme où on veut aller. Parce que le problème, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, la jeunesse aussi, quand on dit il y a moyen de faire des choses, mais oui, mais si tu ne fais pas la politique, comment on va faire? Mais on n'est pas obligé d'être des politiciens. Et c'est ça qu'on doit oublier. On n'est pas obligé d'être des politiciens pour changer une société. Et changer une société commence là où on vit. Comment on traite ceux avec qui on vit? Tu es enseignant. Comment tu enseignes? Est-ce que tu as une éducation qui est axée sur la paix? Tu es un militaire. Comment tu te conduis? Tu travailles dans une banque. Comment tu travailles dans une banque? Le changement vient là où se plaindre, oui, mais ok, tu t'es plaint, c'est bon, maintenant on passe à quoi? Et dans mon association, quand je recueille, parce que j'ai décidé que ce qui peut construire ce pays, c'est raconter aussi ce qu'on a vécu. Parce que le problème, c'est ça. Quand on raconte ce qu'on a vécu dans ce pays, c'est des gens qui ont les moyens de s'offrir des livres, qui peuvent aller sur les réseaux sociaux. Alors que non, il y a des gens qui n'ont pas les moyens, mais qui peuvent raconter des histoires, qui peuvent être de vrais enseignements pour notre pays, notre région. Aujourd'hui, je travaille là-dessus. Je cherche des gens pour témoigner, pour dire, racontez votre vécu, mais pour construire ce pays. Votre pays a besoin de votre histoire. Votre pays a besoin de votre expérience. Mais à la fin, la question que je pose toujours, c'est maintenant, on va où? Quelle est la solution aujourd'hui pour la génération future? Parce que c'est ça qu'on doit se poser. On s'assoit ensemble, c'est bon, mais il y a une génération qui vient, une génération qui a besoin qu'on trace un chemin pour eux. Parce que moi, j'aime bien le côté où on dit j'espère que les jeunes vont voir, ou les enfants vont voir en Burundi une région que moi, je n'ai pas connue. Non. C'est à nous de leur montrer les chemins à suivre, raconter notre vécu, les mémoires blessées. Il y en a beaucoup au Burundi, il y en a en RDC, il y en a au Rwanda, il y en a partout. Mais ces mémoires blessées peuvent être transformées en des mémoires résilientes et constructives. On a la capacité de le faire. Chacun d'entre nous a la capacité de le faire. Mais maintenant, c'est à nous d'élever la voix. On n'est pas obligé. Moi, je ne suis pas quelqu'un de très politique. Je pense que j'aime pas la politique parce que dans tout ce que j'ai vu, j'ai grandi dans un pays. Quand quelqu'un va au pouvoir, tout ce qu'on voit, ça ne m'inspire pas nécessairement de faire la politique. Mais partout où on est, on peut changer cette société, on peut changer cette narrative qu'on voit souvent, les discours de haine, les discours de division. C'est vrai, moi j'étais active sur Twitter de 2015 et les années qui ont suivi, mais à un moment j'ai arrêté parce que ça ne correspondait pas à ce que je voyais. Il y a trop de... Aujourd'hui, pour moi, c'est plus des discours où on se jette du tort, où on se blesse, où on blâme l'autre, ou même des disputes, ou même des insultes que j'arrive plus à voir. Moi, cette plateforme, je n'arrive pas à m'exprimer, mais je me dis, on peut y arriver, mais si on veut. Merci.
Méline, pour votre témoignage et pour l'éloquence qui vous caractérise comme d'habitude. Je sais qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui veulent intervenir et j'espère que nos gens de la régie ont filmé les interventions de nos panélistes parce qu'on en a besoin. Et c'est ça le langage qu'on veut écouter dans cette sous-région, dans notre région d'Afrique. Parce qu'il y a trop de méchanceté dans nos rues et des fois on oublie qu'on a affaire à des êtres humains. Et des êtres humains qui ont souffert et qui continuent à souffrir. Je vais ouvrir je suis sûr que vous avez beaucoup de questions et de commentaires et je ne sais pas qui veut prendre la parole pour poser des questions ou faire une intervention. Do we have someone who would like to take the floor to ask a question? Or I can see you're all reflecting. I was sitting with my sister Hiba from Palestine, and she just whispered in my ear, you know, when Emeline is talking or when Frère Désiré is talking, it's like they're talking about my story. So I don't know who wants to take the floor. Do we have someone? Oh, I can see. So I see Eddie and then Ria. Oh, by the way, Ria, welcome. Ria from South Sudan. She just arrived as well. Welcome to Bujumbura. And I see a young gentleman there in the back. So we start Eddie, Ria, and then the young gentleman there in the back. Thank you. Eddie?
Thank you, Ambassador. Je voulais remercier le panel qui vient de nous édifier encore davantage. La journée, cet après-midi, j'ai eu mon histoire a été racontée par les deux. Et je me retrouve et je me dis, nous sommes des témoins vivants. Il ne faut pas que la génération future subisse ce que nous on a vécu. Nous devons corriger. Et malheureusement, ceux qui sont au pouvoir dans nos États, je ne vais pas particulariser, ils sont de notre âge, la plupart. Ils sont de notre âge, ils sont de notre génération. Ce qui te frappe, c'est que tu te dis, mais lui, il a vécu ça. Mais pourquoi, dans sa tête et son cœur, il ne pense pas qu'on peut aller au-delà de ça pour améliorer? Ça, c'est l'une des choses qui frustre la plupart des gens dans la région. Parce que quand tu vois des gens de ta génération, à l'époque, quand on était encore jeunes, on voyait les Mobutu, les autres, les Abiyarimana ou quoi, on comprenait un peu. Mais maintenant, ceux qui sont au pouvoir sont des gens qui sont nés dont on est de la même génération, mais qui réfléchissent aux antipodes des attentes des gens. Et nous, notre devoir, dans cette sous-région, c'est de corriger par tous les moyens, corriger pour que ces États restent debout, que la population revienne à lui-même. Moi, quand je vois Emeline, il a perdu son père, moi je connais le père d'Emeline. Mais imaginez-vous que jusqu'à aujourd'hui, chaque fois quand on se voit, des fois je me dis, mais tiens, la même question que je me posais avant, Emeline doit être en train de se la poser parce qu'il n'a jamais vu la dépouille de son père. Il dit, mais peut-être il est allé en voyage, peut-être il reviendra. Et maman continue à calmer, il dit, et puis en grandissant et en vous formant spirituellement et moralement, vous tenez le coup, vous allez expliquer aussi à vos enfants quand ils vous disent, mais where is grandpa? Tu commences à parler alors. Mais comme l'a dit le frère Désiré, le problème, ici dans nos États, l'autre est mauvais. Nous sommes bons. Quand tu racontes ton histoire, tu cherches toujours à montrer que la victime, c'est toi. Hein? Donc, les autres, là, ils ne sont pas bons. Alors que ce n'est pas comme ça. Tout le monde a été blessé. Cette région est pleine de blessures terribles. Du Sud-Soudan jusqu'à l'Afrique centrale. Des blessures trop graves. Mais pour les réparer, nous ne devons pas être émotifs. Nous devons être à sang-froid et aller ensemble dans le droit chemin et expliquer aux gouvernants qu'il est temps de changer. Le paradigme doit changer. Il faut changer le paradigme. Il faut réfléchir autrement et orienter nos pensées dans la bonne voie où il y aura du vrai plus jamais ça. Imaginez-vous aujourd'hui la haine qu'il y a au Rwanda entre gens comme ça, la haine qu'il y a au Burundi, au Congo, n'en parlons plus maintenant, c'est pour ceux qui vont sur Twitter, ils voient tout ce qui se passe. Mais qu'est-ce qu'il faut pour apaiser ces cœurs? C'est là où il faut aller réparer. Il faut qu'il y ait des gens qui ont fait la psychologie clinique ou quoi. Il faut aller vers ces gens. Il faut carrément changer. Ceux qui ont l'évangile dans leur poche peuvent aider, ou bien les psychologues. Il faut aller, tout le monde est malade. Il faut réparer, il faut donner des paroles qui apaisent, pas qui brûlent. C'est très dommage que c'est nous qui avons cette tâche, mais nous devons l'assumer. Peuple africain, nous devons assumer cette tâche. Ne laissez jamais le politicien prendre ton destin à main. Non. Parce qu'il a d'autres visées. Là, je parle du politicien dans la version actuelle que nous connaissons. Parce que la politique, même si on la met comme ça, la vraie politique n'est pas celle qu'on est en train de vivre. Ouais. Tu dois savoir gérer la cité, les gens. Être donné equal opportunity à tout le monde. C'est ça, être bien. Et nous avons ce devoir. Je voulais apaiser Emeline et d'autres frères et sœurs qui sont blessés, qui ont été blessés. Nous avons la chance d'être grands dans nos cœurs. Nous devons garder cette longueur et amener les autres vers là où nous sommes. Et ça va aider beaucoup. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Eddie. For those of you who are not Burundians, you may not understand the emotions which is floating in this room, but the Burundi here understand what we are talking about. Eddie talked about people from our generation, and I was thinking about something that President Museveni of Uganda said: do not confuse biology and ideology. Because you can be a young person and be ideologically disoriented, just as you can be an older person and be ideologically solid. So I think I'm going to give Ria the floor.
Oh, technology. All right. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Mwiriwe, I learned that from the airport. I just came from South Sudan and I bring you warm greetings from Juba. My name is Ria William Liada. I am a women's human rights and peace activist, and I give this credit to my sister Jacqueline for welcoming me here and inviting me into the space, and the organizers. Thank you so much. When the panelists were sharing, I felt touched, I felt broken inside, and I felt triggered at some point coming from South Sudan. For those who know South Sudan has been a war country, and we are still in war despite signing 2 peace agreements. I hope we don't sign more peace agreements. For me, I call myself an East African because my grandmother, maternal grandmother, is from Rwanda, and paternal grandfather is from Uganda. I just met Samuel, and I said we are divided by the boundaries, but Africans, we are one. And I am grateful to the panelists. When Emily, you're sharing about how do we mourn even when we've not buried, that touched me, because having left South Sudan as a young child, There are people we hear as ancestors, but we have never buried them, and we still continue to mourn them. So it is painful. And I have 3 questions. One is, how do we forge a common identity? Given, for example, South Sudan, we have 64 tribes plus, and before we were fighting one common enemy, and now we are fighting among ourselves. You know, they say when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, and right now it is us that are suffering. So how do we build that common identity? The former panelist talked about forging a common identity. How do we build a common identity in a country like South Sudan, which is having more than 64 tribes, and we are fighting each other? Struggle as well. And women still need the struggle for a better South Sudan, even better Africa. So how do we ensure that the heroes are not forgotten? And finally, how do we heal and sustain as the peace workers? I am a peace worker, I am a peace activist, but I feel tired. There are days I feel like I should pack my bags and move somewhere, and I'm like, where will I move? Will I move to Canada? Will I move to the US? And I'm like, how different is it, you know? But then how do we sustain us, the peace workers, to continue doing the work that we are doing? Thank you.
Well, some food for thought for us, the commissioners. Yes, the young gentleman there, and then we'll give a chance to the panelists to respond.
Ok, merci. Je m'appelle Salvatore Nenesi-Guillet et je suis journaliste. En même temps, je représente une association de journalistes économiques. Donc, quand on parle de la paix, moi, ça m'interpelle doublement. Donc, la paix est là pour tout le monde, mais la paix aussi, c'est un ami du développement, de l'économie. Si on manque de la paix, on ne peut jamais rêver de développement de nos nations. Alors, moi je me demande, alors le rôle de la jeunesse dans la résolution des conflits. Je me demande le rôle de la jeunesse aussi dans la promotion de la paix dans notre région, même dans le monde. Oui. Donc, cette question, je la pose aux panélistes, à M. Yamoulemier et à tout le monde, même à Emeline et au précédent panéliste, le panéliste qui les a précédés. Donc, parce que, vous voyez, la jeunesse est emprisonnée dans une histoire, dans des histoires des pays, et emprisonné aussi dans les narratifs comme Yamoulemier l'a dit. Imaginez, par exemple, donc, en RDC actuellement, dans le conflit actuel. Est-ce que si la jeunesse de Kivu trouve un espace de voter librement, est-ce qu'ils allaient voter pour la guerre? Est-ce que si la jeunesse de Rubavu, de l'autre côté, au Rwanda, mais quand les hommes, les politiciens, à Kinshasa et l'autre à Kigali, qui s'acquisent, qui commencent à s'acquiser, voilà, la jeunesse suit. Donc, la jeunesse sont roulés dans la farine comme ça et vont suivre, vont manifester contre l'ennemi c'est tel, l'ennemi c'est tel, l'ennemi c'est tel. Mais vous voyez que la jeunesse vraiment donc, est emprisonnée dans son narratif, comme l'a dit, et c'est un problème. Alors, le rôle de la jeunesse est très important pour moi. Donc, peut-être les panélistes vont me donner de la réponse. Donc, mais, comme ce que nous voyons, par exemple, dans la région, en Éthiopie, par exemple, donc, quand les Tigrés sont bombardés actuellement, quand les Tigrés prennent les armes et quand le gouvernement Addis prennent des décisions très musclées de bombarder et barricader toutes les routes qui mènent à Tigré pour, vous voyez, imaginez l'enfant qui est là, qui observe tout, qui sera rescapé dans 10 ans, qu'est-ce qu'il fera? Imaginez un enfant de 15 ans, de 12 ans qui est terrible, c'est terrible. Mais aussi, vous voyez, au pouvoir, ce sont des gens qui ont plus de 50 ans. Qui ont plus de 50 ans. Alors, ces gens-là ont des agendas à cacher, à protéger, comme ça. Et aussi, ils ont intérêt d'entretenir les guerres, les conflits partout, voilà, pour leur intérêt. Donc, je vois que la société est piégée par les politiciens, et minée aussi par les politiciens, parce que pas des idées, donc qui cheminent vers la paix, comme nous sommes en train de parler de ça, de la paix ici, non, comme nous le souhaitons aussi. Alors, je peux m'arrêter par là, mais le rôle de la jeunesse, vraiment, c'est ma question, c'est mon questionnement actuellement. Merci beaucoup.
Je vais donner la parole maintenant aux panélistes pour qu'ils puissent répondre, mais je voulais te dire que pour chaque bombardement, on dit qu'on crée 4 générations de martyrs. Et que ça devrait faire réfléchir nos leaders chaque fois qu'ils s'embarquent dans ce genre de guerre. Et ce pays en sait quelque chose. Et aussi, pour ton information, l'Union africaine a nommé le président de la République du Burundi, son Excellence le général-major Evariste Ndayishimiye, comme le champion des jeunes. Il y a la déclaration de Bujumbura que je t'invite à lire, parce qu'elle est la déclaration de Bujumbura des jeunes. Elle parle vraiment de cette problématique-là. Et c'est parce que nous, au Burundi, on reconnaît ce genre de choses avec nos souffrances. Mais je vais donner la parole vraiment à nos panélistes. Je commence avec le professeur, puis après Désiré Amoulemier et Emeline.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm going to start answering to my brother Eddie, who's saying that the leadership is not looking the right direction. Political leaders, you don't understand, they are politicians, you are an activist, and you don't have to go to the right direction. It is the role of civil society to work hard to educate the population, to give them the best decision, like what we have here now, or to push politicians to take the right decision. I remember my experience in Burundi when former President Peter Nkurunziza was here. Utu, but now those people like you are the one who must educate the population in order for the president to have the right balance. Apartheid was the worst thing that we have known in the world regarding human rights violations. People were involved in South Africa. They took a leader who can bring an end to a cycle of violence. It was Mandela. But Mandela was chosen because what interests were at stake? What interests in the Great Lakes? We, Africans, we need to take the right decision. But I'm going to tell you something that's we have been discussing it here for a long period of time without going deeper in consideration. Chinua Achebe say slavery, colonialism, broke the social cohesion of black people. We are sick. We are sick. You see, sometimes we want to treat the consequences of a problem without going to the root causes. Black people, they change their skin because they want to be closer to white. This is not a disease. They change their hair. They want to have long hair. God did not give black people long hair. This is not a disease. No, these are the manifestation of people who are sick. But we don't want to accept it because sometimes when white people try to share some information, we say, no, they are very racist, they are good with this and that. We don't want to accept it, but we must look at the history of African people. Slavery killed us, destroyed us. You know, the former president of South Africa, Frederick de Klerk, was saying, if we give money to black people, they will start killing one another. And it's happening in the township. You know the history of that country. we need to go back to the drawing board. The drawing board is what? First, understand that there's something wrong with us. We need to accept it. We don't need to say, no, these people are racist, they don't want, we need to sit down and see how we can heal ourselves. After healing, we can treat everything that we are seeing. I work in the field of drug abuse, prevention, rehabilitation. If you see a drug addict person, a person who is addicted to drugs, you see it, you are spending a lot of money in drugs. He's not going to understand you because you're in the right frame of mind, you understand what is going in his life, but you, because he is a bit addicted, cannot understand. The same thing happened to us. We have a problem that we need to treat, but I used to read the Bible in the past. What I know for sure is that it's not going to happen very soon. I'm not pessimistic, but I try to be realistic. And those who are striving to bring the light to African people, they will be treated as coconut. Is what I can say. Thank you.
Well, this brings us to the issue we discussed earlier about mental health and the importance of mental health when we're dealing with peace. It's something that is often overlooked, but if like he's saying, we're sick, it means that this is now in the realm of mental health. Padiri.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais commencer par ce que M. Di a dit. Je ne veux pas retourner en arrière sur ce que le professeur vient de dire, mais je pense que la question, je suis un panafricain positif. Et je suis optimiste que l'Afrique avance. Et je suis optimiste que les pays africains peuvent avancer. Il suffit qu'on apprenne à identifier la main invisible. On écoute trop la main invisible et la main invisible manipule nos identités et nous écoutons ces manipulations, mais lui est en train de piller l'Afrique. Et nous, en train de nous battre à Goma, au sud Kivu, en Éthiopie, lui est en train d'attraper du pétrole, de l'or et du cobalt. C'est à nous de réfléchir et de prendre des solutions et avoir une solution africaine aux problèmes africains. Et pour les questions des conflits, je me dis toujours, je reviens à ce que I'm coming back to the question from our friend from Sudan on the common identity. You know, there is a book written by Amsel called "The Ethnicity is a Historical Issue." Let me show you one example. Everybody know Ivory Coast, isn't it? Yes. Ivory Coast. Look on the shift of social identity in Ivory Coast from south to the north. South, that was a geographical identity, now has become, in the Ivory Coast, is an ethnic identity. Ivory Coast now are divided in terms of from south to the north. But yet, in Ivory Coast, you can find more than 324, I think, tribes in Ivory Coast. So why did they come during the war in 2002 of that identification of the north and of the south? I do believe that coming on the common identity is coming on the same humanity that we share, each of us. That's the common identity that in which I believe. That's the common identity that we have to promote in Africa. For sure, knowing that my brother and my sister, we share the same blood, will bring more solidarity than division. So all those tribes that of South Africa, there may be 64, 66, these are not the true identities. But by the way, how many identities do we have? Look on yourself, many identities. you come from a family, you come from a tribe, you come from a region, you are probably a believer you may be Catholics, Muslim, I don't know, whatever. All those things are identities. I'm not sure how we have chosen tribes and ethnic belonging as a key and a tool of living in our continent. I don't know why, but I know why, because it is an identity that I can manipulate very easily as a politician. An identity that creates a false togetherness. An identity based, the togetherness of ethnic belonging is based on the wrong analysis telling me that we are just brother because of this, and when we reach the level, the time of eating, you eat alone. Before we're together, oppressed together. So now we have reached a level that we are no longer oppressed. Then you have another new identity. The identity that I believe in is the one between the rich and the poor. This is the identity that separates us as human beings, rich and poor. I do think that in this world, in this African, our different countries, we can live a good togetherness where we can have the rich who are honest and who can make things better for the poor, living in a dignity way. I think if there's something that we have to fight for, is those who are economically oppressing Africa. They may be from outside, they may be from inside. This is the fight that we have to do. Not fighting because you are Gikuyu and Jaluo, not fighting because you are Hutu and Tutsi. There's no value on that fight. Let's fight those who are eating our money, because they are, because they are violating our own right, which is the right to the good of our different countries that God has given us. That is the fight for which I'm ready to do and to come and help anybody who will fight for that. He may be a politician, he may be a civil society actors. That one, I will help him to fight for those who are stealing our goods. They may be from outside, they may be from inside, because they are violating a deep right of a human being, the dignity and the right for life. So this is the common identity, because that we have to create, and that we have how a human being has to live as a human being. And I think if there's something that brings war and conflict, is what is an unjust management of the state. And an unjust management of the state is always based on the ethnicity of belonging, because just I need vote, And after you have voted me, it's over. You are no longer my brother, because my brother becomes money, and enterprise is coming from outside, to which I will sell gold, trees, petrol, and whatever you want. So when you finish to cast the vote, the brotherhood, ethnic identity brotherhood is over. So we have to know that, and we have to create this spirit that, I know you are my brother, you belong to this ethnic group, but how come if you have 10 houses and I'm living in a house without even any chair? How are we brothers? You tell me, how are we brothers? If you are driving 10 cars and I can't not even afford a motorcycle or a bicycle, how are we a brother? So we have to, let's look, the brotherhood that we have to develop is that one between the poor who have to fight for their own right and one day it will come where we will destroy everything because you are looking for our right. This time it will come. This time it will come when somebody will no longer sing, I'm in this group, because you are singing with money. You have to bring us our money. That's what we need, not singers that we belong together. No. We belong together, but we don't share anything together. What does that mean? That was how I can't, I can't, and then there is another question on how to, sorry? Yeah. I think in this Africa, we still have this culture. Even when there is an achievement done by a woman, it will be recorded as an achievement of a man. Even if you have a good minister of this particular sector, everybody will congratulate the husband. I don't know why it is like that. I don't know it is like that. I think we don't change culture within 1 minute, by the way, but we have to work on that. We have to work on that. Because there is no, and these days I like to tell to my brother men that even within the church, I like to tell to people, we will not continue to be a priest man in a church where 70% are women. It can't work. And the argument is not theological argument. That's why those who know the Catholic Church, the current Pope is changing everything, bringing women position, but some are crying, men, they cry when change comes. Why the Pope is bringing women at Roman Catholic Church headquarters? But they are Christian, they are carrying master's degree like yourself. Why are you crying? So I think this is something that we have to take into consideration, because peace and reconciliation is realized when we act proactively. Don't leave anybody behind. Because if you leave him behind, he will claim that right that you have left him behind. And then I think the question of involvement of young people, parce qu'il a posé la question en français, le problème d'intégrer les jeunes dans les processus, je crois que la condamnation des jeunes n'est plus un choix, ça doit être, ce n'est plus un choix. Je pense que c'est comme ça que la plupart des États, au moins africains, ici en Afrique de l'Est, sont en train de donner un espace pour les jeunes en vue du développement. Et comme l'ambassadeur Ngoga l'a dit, au niveau de l'Union africaine, il y a ce fora des jeunes. Je pense que tous les États doivent prendre en considération la problématique de la jeunesse et la question de l'emploi, par exemple. Parce que si demain les jeunes n'ont pas d'emploi, ils peuvent ne pas fonder des mouvements de rébellion, mais ils deviendront des voleurs, ils vont voler nos véhicules ici, dehors et partout. Ce n'est pas une question de choix. Si on n'occupe pas les jeunes, la conséquence sera cela, ça s'est démontré un peu partout. Voilà. Je pense que je vais laisser la parole à...
Oui, merci. D'abord, merci à Eddy, mon frère. Oui, tout ce que tu as dit, c'est à nous de faire en sorte de reconstruire notre pays, notre région et le monde. Et je pense qu'on a la force vraiment en nous pour faire ça, pour transmettre ça à la jeunesse ou même les enfants qui naissent aujourd'hui. C'est un combat pour moi, mais c'est un combat pour tout le monde. C'est pas juste nous. Mais je me félicite déjà de voir qu'on est passé de victime à résistant et qu'on a une force nécessaire pour y arriver. Je vais répondre, embrayer sur ce que Désiré Moulémé a dit sur la question de ma sœur du Soudan du Sud. Comment on fait pour être sûr que les héroïnes ne sont pas oubliées? Moi, ce que j'ai fait en 2016, c'est là où j'ai écrit mon histoire sur mon père, et sur mon blog, mais j'ai continué à écrire. J'écris de temps en temps. Quand je sens que c'est une histoire qui me parle, j'écris. En 2018, j'ai écrit sur ma mère. Parce que finalement, le problème, c'est qu'on croit que les héroïnes, c'est les gens qu'on a vus qui ont mené la guerre, qui ont pris les armes, qui sont des activistes à un niveau très connu. Non. Parce que finalement, les héroïnes, ce sont nos mamans. Les héroïnes, ce sont ces femmes qui ont refusé, que même malgré tout ce qu'elles viennent de vivre, parce que ce sont des veuves, à qui en 72, on a enlevé leur mari en leur disant qu'ils n'avaient pas le droit de dire qu'elles sont veuves ou qu'elles ont perdu leur mari parce que les maris étaient considérés comme des traîtres. Donc, tu ne peux pas faire le deuil pour un traître, parce que c'est ça qu'on leur disait. C'est des moments quand même qui ont fait en sorte que leurs enfants ne grandissent pas dans la haine. Pour moi, c'est ça, les héroïnes. C'est des héroïnes, c'est comme ma maman, justement, malgré le drame qu'on venait de vivre, elle a toujours dit, le crime de sang, il n'y a pas un crime qui vient au-delà du crime de sang. Donc, tant qu'on ne connaît pas ce qui s'est passé pour votre père, je ne veux pas quelqu'un qui vienne dire, voilà, c'est tel ou tel ou tel. Il a fait barrage pour qu'on ne grandisse pas dans la haine. Ça, ce sont des héroïnes. Finalement, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire? C'est, même dans un article, même sur les réseaux sociaux, parler de ces petites choses qu'on considère comme petites, mais qui sont des gestes forts. Parce que finalement, ces mamans, elles ont construit des personnalités des femmes et des hommes qui sont aujourd'hui ici pour se battre pour la paix. Les héroïnes, ce sont ces femmes-là, alors. On a Twitter, on a des réseaux sociaux. Finalement, commençons à parler de ces héroïnes de cette façon. Même à un bas niveau, on va arriver à un moment, on va arriver à un niveau supérieur. Mais commençons même d'une façon, même au niveau de la communauté. Ça, c'est la première chose que je pouvais partager. Et comment on fait en sorte que les actrices de la paix puissent avoir de l'énergie pour continuer? Moi, je dois dire que c'est difficile. Mais la paix demande des sacrifices. Pour construire la paix sans sacrifice, il ne faut pas se mentir. La paix demande des sacrifices. La paix demande qu'on soit fatigué. La paix demande qu'on soit jugé. Parce qu'on va parler des fois des sujets qu'on ne va pas aimer. Moi, quand j'ai commencé à écrire, j'ai été critiquée parce que c'était une période où, moi, en étant avec ce qui se passait au Burundi 2015, je suis une ancienne journaliste, taxée d'opposante. Mon père était un Tutsi de l'ancienne armée. Il y a plusieurs choses dans ce pays. Ceux qui sont burundais savent très bien. Il venait de Burundi, une province du sud qui était considérée comme celle qui a dirigé le pays depuis longtemps. Je n'étais pas supposée écrire, mais j'ai écrit. C'est ça. On sera fatigué, mais on n'abandonne pas. Est-ce qu'à un moment, on a envie d'abandonner? Oui. En 2018, j'ai écrit que j'ai eu envie, à un moment, je posais la question, est-ce que ce n'est pas le moment de quitter le Burundi? Parce qu'on venait d'enlever un ami à moi, et lui aussi, on ne l'a jamais retrouvé. Donc, je me disais, est-ce qu'à chaque fois, on doit revivre la même chose? On venait de tuer des gens à Louagalika. Je pense que l'ambassadeur Fred est au courant. Des hommes armés se sont introduits dans une communauté et ont tué des familles. Je me disais, est-ce que finalement, le Burundi, c'est ça? À chaque fois qu'on se dit qu'on se relève, on doit faire un deuil. On doit avoir des gens décimés. J'ai écrit en disant, est-ce que des fois, des pensées de quitter le Burundi me traversent? Oui. Mais je me pose la question, si je pars, qui va prendre la relève après moi? Si je dis que je pars, ça veut dire que même les autres qui m'ont vu commencer à faire des choses vont se dire, même si elle a abandonné, moi aussi je vais abandonner. Oui, tu vas être fatiguée, ma sœur du Soudan du Sud, mais il ne faut pas abandonner. Parce que ce que tu vas faire, comme je l'ai dit, on ne sait pas comment on est, on ne sait pas comment on meurt, mais l'important c'est ce qu'on laisse derrière nous. Parce que si on ne te voit pas abdiquer, les autres se diront qu'il ne faut pas abdiquer. Mais les sacrifices, il faudra les faire, parce qu'il faut prendre sur soi. Mais ça vaut la peine parce que la paix pour moi vaut la peine. Donc oui, fatigué, oui, démoralisé, oui, déstabilisé, oui, des fois on a peur, mais oui, tout ça arrive, mais non, on n'abandonne pas.
Eh bien, est-ce que nous avons d'autres questions? Mais avant de prendre une autre série de questions, mon grand-père à moi, une fois on lui a demandé, en 72 justement, quand il y avait les tueries ici au Burundi, on lui a demandé, mais quelle est votre ethnie? Il a dit, mon ethnie c'est notre humanité. C'est un homme qui a sauvé beaucoup de vies durant les massacres de 72 ici au Burundi. Et un des enfants qu'il a sauvé durant les massacres, il avait fait traverser l'enfant jusqu'en RDC, parce qu'il ne voulait pas qu'on tue les jeunes de cette époque-là. Un de ses enfants est devenu président de la République du Burundi. Plus tard. C'est celui qui est mort dans l'avion avec le président Habyarimana. mais c'était juste pour rappeler, parce que j'ai pensé à ça quand le Père Désiré parlait donc de notre identité commune, c'est notre humanité. C'est très important. Est-ce que nous avons d'autres questions? S'ils n'ont pas d'autres questions, je pense qu'on va prendre une pause café et puis on va inviter Hiba qui va nous parler un peu donc du travail qu'on est en train de faire et je pense que tout le monde a envie de l'écouter. Mais j'aimerais vraiment applaudir nos panélistes, s'il vous plaît, applaudissez. Et j'aimerais demander à mon grand frère, le Père Désiré Yamouremier, s'il peut accorder peut-être à certains de nos journalistes qui sont là, ou blogueurs, vraiment une interview par rapport à ce qu'il a dit. J'aimerais la même chose aussi au professeur et à Emeline aussi. Parce que je pense que nous avons aussi, en tant que commission, nous avons le devoir d'amplifier les voix de la raison. Je vous remercie. Break is not yet ready, but it's coming. But so you can just relax a little bit while it comes. Yes, and I want my dear sister Hiba to have energy before she. This is to, you press to talk. Can you all please take your seats? Emeline, everybody? Christo, I think, okay, good. So, it is now my distinct pleasure to welcome the head of our secretariat of the commission. She's been really working very hard on this. The Ugandan crew, can you have your attention? Exactly. So Hiba just arrived from Geneva, and but she's full of energy and energized by the discussions we've been having. And I want to give her the floor so that she can really run you through the principles of peace that we have developed so far based on the consultations, but also the covenant, what she's presenting, and what will be our next steps. Hiba, you have the floor. Developed
Thank
so far
you so much,
based
Fred.
on the consultations.
See, I'm adjusting
but
the
also
microphone
covenant, what
from
she's
the
presenting,
Burundian
and what will be our next
and
steps.
Dutch
Hiba, you
height to a Palestinian height, which is a lot more accessible to me, at least. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be with you, and I have to take this opportunity really to thank can't hear me? Is this better? Yeah. All right, great. So firstly, thank you, Fred, really. It's just absolutely wonderful to be here, and I think without you and the colleagues at Rise and Shine, we would have not been able to come together. So thank you very much for that and for your leadership in the Commission. Look, I'm going to share with you a presentation of the Covenant, the process, where we are. But I think the conversation that happened before, just before our break, really touched me on a personal level, and I was saying that to Fred. Listening, to the stories, listening to the issue around the questions of dignity, of healing, as someone who grew up under occupation, as someone who often sits in many European capitals, as now everyone is so moved by the suffering in Ukraine. And it happened with me that in a recent conference, someone was seriously moved, a politician from one of the countries, and mentioned in the 21st century, we cannot condone an act of occupation on a sovereign land. And I was thinking, there is another occupation happening, which has been going on for 72 years. So I completely empathize with the notions of, that at times one can lose hope. One can see no way out. But I think what was really touching in the conversation that happened before is that we still sense a strong sense of hope and determination to move forward. So I thank you for the opportunity to be with you and to listen and to learn and to see how we can take this process forward. So I'm going to go through a presentation. And the opportunity to be with you, if I'm not making too much sense, to stop me and to learn to be and to see how we can take this process forward. I have not had. So I'm going to go through a presentation, but I'm here for the opportunity to be with you. If I'm not making too much sense, to stop me and to learn to be to see how we can take this process forward. I have not had. So I'm going to go through. I'm not going to dwell on what gave impetus to the well. If I'm not making too much sense, Fred would have done that quite eloquently in the morning. But just so I'm going to go through. I'm not going to dwell on urgency, but if I'm not burnt, I think that's what I would have done that quite eloquently in the morning. The urgency, but just all the issues. I'm not going to dwell on urgency, but if I'm not burnt, I think that's what I would have done that quite eloquently in the morning. The urgency, but just all the issues. I'm not going to dwell on urgency, but if I'm not burnt, I think that's what I would have done that quite eloquently in the morning. urgency, just all the issues that urge that something has to be done. For example, urgency, just all the issues that has urge that there is responsibility for the for example, about my urgency, just all the issues that has urge that there is responsibility for the for example, and hope is that despite all the limitations, just all the issues that has urge that there is responsibility for the for example, and hope is that despite these limitations, just all the issues that has urge that there is responsibility for the continue to work, and hope is that despite these from the outside of the continue to work, and hope is that despite these these are the limitations from the outside of the continue to work, and hope is that despite these these are the limitations. One is that we felt it's very quiet from the outside of the community. It's very that despite this one is that they are very quiet from the outside range conversation and dialogue can actually solve this one is that they are very quiet from the outside range are actually situated such a can actually solve unregulated space like the way that they are very quiet are actually situated and have such a can actually solve when you're talking about space what are the ones like the way that brings reference they are actually situated and there is actually solve when you're talking about space what are the things very clear to us on the way that brings definition and they are actually that way this we are actually when you're talking about space what are the things very clear to us on the way that brings definition and this process has to be and we are actually when you real society what are the things very clear to us on the way that brings definition shaped by this process has to be and they are actually in real society what are the things very clear to us on the way also answer definition shaped by this process has to be and they are actually in real society what are the things very clear to us on the way also answer definition shaped by this process has to be and they are actually we are seeing that harm is the evidence that these others had actually led them to really like the fact that things are raising down this methodology. We are seeing that harm is the evidence that these. Alright, so what I was doing had actually led them to really like the fact that what's interesting is that things are raising down this methodology. So we are seeing that harm is the evidence today. Alright, so what I'm about to do is I can show you actually things interesting is that things what we're hearing across today. Alright, so what I'm about to do is I can show you actually it's not only single that things dynamics that are actually across today. Alright, so what in many cases these breakdowns is not only single that things it's not dynamics that are actually across today. Alright, so what in many cases these breakdowns is not push single that society it's not dynamic and the legitimacy it's really around the key issues that what in many cases these breakdowns is not losing the society and the legitimacy was really interesting around the global situation that what I don't see it anymore breakdown around Afghanistan it was really interesting that and the legitimacy it was really interesting around the global situation civil society I don't see it anymore so much emphasis on Afghanistan and a lot less that and the legitimacy there's a lot more emphasis on the transitional milestones and elections and plans flattening things like democratic states and there's a lot less emphasis there's a lot more emphasis on laying the foundations and elections and plans flattening these words in democratic states there's a lot less emphasis there's a lot more emphasis on laying the foundations and elections and plans flattening there's also talking about our role and relevance there's a lot less emphasis and those who are not are they becoming and laying the foundations and elections and this is also talking something that we've seen in the relevance there's a lot less emphasis and those who are not are they and the third one is really laying the foundations and elections and this is also talking something that we've seen in the relevance there's a lot less emphasis and those who are not are they and the third one is really laying the foundations and elections and this is also talking something that we've seen in the relevance there's a lot less emphasis like those who are not and the third one is really laying the foundations and elections and this is also talking something that we've seen in the relevance there's a lot less emphasis like those who are not and the third one is really laying the foundations and elections and this is really around how we see the relevance has how we approach it and here it's really the balance interest and this is really around how we see the relevance has how we approach it and here it's really look at the balance interest and really around how we see the relevance has how we utilization and here it's really the balance interest really a fundamental issue because a lot of the system how we utilize and here it is designed around the balance interest because a lot of the system how we utilize and here it is designed around the balance and the second one was America designed after a lot of the systems how we utilize and here it was designed around the balance and the second one was how local designed after a lot of the systems and sometimes even how state that were aligned to that and the second one was how local designed something that a lot of the systems the need to and sometimes even how state applies that were aligned to that and the second one was how local respect and a lot more generally with that and sometimes even how state applies that were aligned to something that is and the second one was how local respect and a lot more generally with that and sometimes even how state applies that were aligned to something that here is really quality how local respect and a lot more really look at how do you and sometimes recognize how state applies that were aligned to something that when they were talking about really very quality how local respect but there was a lot more really look at how do
looking at when they were very small, not very research, how do you actually make a figure and how did that research and I think this is where the key area is very shift to research and how do you actually make a figure and how did that research and I think this is where the key area is very shift to question that idea, how do you actually make a question, how do we actually make that research and state-societal relationship in a way that you know and I think this is where the key area is very shift to question that idea, how do you actually make a question, how do we actually make that research and state-societal relationship. So seven ways that you know there were 7 issues where the key area is very shift to question that idea, how do we actually make so 8, how do we actually make that come together and state-societal. So 7 ways that you know 7 issues and the reason why I should say that idea so 8, how do we actually make that love together and state-societal. So 7 ways that the first 3 7 issues and the foundation. The reason why she says that idea so 8, how do we actually make that love together and state-societal. So 7 are about the first 3 7 issues and the foundation. The reason why she says that idea so 8, how do we actually make that love we represent for that. So 7 are about the first 3 7 issues and the foundation. The reason why she says that idea so 8, how do we actually make that love we represent for that. So 7 are about the first 3 7 issues and the foundation. The reason why she says the moral purpose and unity of 8, how do we actually make that love we represent for that. So 7 are about the first 3 7 issues and the foundation. The reason why she says the moral purpose and really positioning the question of unity as we are along the way, how we make state-society and the moral purpose and here we're looking at one dimension, unity as the ultimate way how we make state-society. It's also about empowerment that it is the moral purpose and here we're looking at one dimension, so as the ultimate way how we highlight the idea of it. It's also about empowerment that it is the moral purpose and here we're looking at one dimension, so the solidarity one here we're talking about the idea of it. Similar, also about empowerment that there is the moral purpose and here we're looking at one dimension, so the solidarity one so we're talking about the idea right now in the world so about empowerment that there is otherwise aspect and here we're looking at one dimension, so the solidarity one so we're talking about the idea right now in the world so about empowerment that solidarity needs to be and wise mission that we have shared so that solidarity are so we can very right now so much so and humility that solidarity needs to be and wise mission that we have shared enhancing solidarity so really essential right now very essential so and humility that solidarity needs to be and wise mission and it entails on that we have shared enhancing solidarity so really essential of how we very essential so and humility that solidarity needs to be and wise mission and it entails on that we have shared enhancing solidarity is really essential of how we power so and humility that solidarity needs to be and wise mission and it entails on that we have shared enhancing solidarity is really essential of how we power so and accountable security and solidarity this is quite straightforward and is quite strong enhancing solidarity is really essential where you see a shift from the usual way solidarity this is quite straightforward and is quite strong stable enhancing solidarity is that we need where you see a shift from the usual way solidarity this is quite straightforward and is quite strong stable about any environment where you see a shift from the usual way and pluralism in a way there's a lot of emphasis on inclusion but to a certain degree giving us and we're trying to push away and there's a lot of emphasis on inclusion but to a certain degree giving engaging that we did all the and we're trying to push away and there's a lot of emphasis on inclusion but to a certain degree giving engaging that we did all the and we're trying to push away and actually a lot of emphasis on inclusion but to a certain subsidiarity, I mean, this is really trying to partial in many cases subsidiarity, this is really trying to partial in many subsidiarity, but it's also looking at the relationship with various actors and also the central so in a way that affects us from under, but it's also looking at the relationship with various actors and also the central so and finally the hybrid way to get us from under, this is also looking at the relationship with various actors and also the service takes time and finally the hybrid way there is no one size also looking at complex matters various actors so there's local structure takes time and finally the hybrid that are actually enjoying complex matters there is nothing wrong that so of course moving racing and finally the hybrid that are actually enjoying complex matters there is nothing wrong that so moving racing and finally the hybrid that are actually enjoying so I think I'm going to stop here there is nothing wrong it sounds quite we need to reunite around common values and have a conversation around peace that is centered around common values, and the values of dignity, solidarity, and humility have to be central to it. We need to bring in a strong focus on legitimacy as a lens when we're engaging and supporting, whether we're externals or whether we're internals or whether we're civil society actors in the society calling on power holders, or whether we are power holders and looking at the legitimacy as a lens in terms of asking the right questions. Are those that should be involved, and how? And are we delivering out of this piece what populations expect? That's what the focus on legitimacy is about. And pluralism is not being satisfied only with inclusion and representation, but actually really reconfiguring state-society relationships, the social contract in a way that is more conducive and embed peace into society and allow it to take root quite strongly. And hybrid solutions is really around having the humility to understand that context, history, and practical wisdom matter. And we cannot transplant one state institution model into another country because it takes time. And we cannot expect that, for example, one country that is going out of transition to achieve in 2 years what it took, for example, a European country to achieve in 200 years. And I think that's what the essence of this covenant. In the coming few weeks, we will be wrapping this first phase up. We will be launching this in January. And with it, we are not going to launch this as a report. I think there's a strong commitment both from the commissioners and the various supporters of the initiative that this cannot be a report that gathers dust, but we're actually going to give it legs. So we're announcing with it a follow-up mechanism to ensure that these principles are advocated for, are anchored at the regional level, at the national level, at the international level, but they're also taken up and that we're monitoring them so they actually can become an accountability tool. But the ambition is that these become something like how the feminist movement uses 1325 or others to say, we expect adherence to these principles, or you're violating these principles, but also to be part of the calculus of decision makers when they want to make better decisions around peacemaking. So this is where we are, and I really hope from this consultation that we get a stronger sense also from you. First, how does this resonate to you? Where you see the main obstacles to us taking this forward and implementing it, and also ideas around how we can bring this more strongly to the region. And I think with Fred's leadership as well with us over the past couple of years, it's been really important to reflect on that. But I think this is also an invitation for us to think about this together and to see how we can actually take it forward. All right, thank you.
Hiba, thank you so very much for the presentation and the 7 principles. I think that it pretty much captured our 8. There are 8. Why did I? This is not the graveyard shift, but anyway, I think that there is one thing that has been a central theme here. There are 2, but they are somewhat interlinked. It's issues related to how do we face fear to speak up. I think it was mentioned early on, and that stayed with me. I think it was Stella. And then the issue related to navigating troubled waters, taking into account the scars that we have, issues related to mental health as well, because as the previous session just ended, I don't know how we can really capture that, but I think it would be good to capture that issue. The other thing that I was going to suggest, I don't know, going forward, like you said, you were talking about the Beijing movement. It's the idea of finding leaders in office who can be our champion. Leaders in office who can be our champion. I think that one common theme which we heard during the UN General Assembly was the need to have a global governance architecture that is inclusive, inclusive and fair. And I think these principles talk to that. So I think that maybe these are some of my initial ideas. I have some more thoughts, but I just wanted to get the conversation going. Thank you.
I'm going to ask also Bert to come in on some of these questions, and also you, so if you'd like to answer. But Bert, over to you.
Just very shortly, by thanking, first of all, Hiba for this excellent presentation. This is where we are. And I think what you emphasized is this is an initiative that is both top-down, but especially bottom-up. That's why we do these discussions like we have here very intensively. And they are reflected in this work and also in the follow-up mechanism. So if you would be, I don't think you are misguided by the fact, okay, why principles? I think principles are absolutely key at the moment that in different parts of our world, we have to find a language and a set of points of reference to move on. But the specific solutions in each specific country are obviously different. So you're not going to say we do this or that. In South Sudan or in Burundi or in Guatemala where we were, obviously the language, and this is very interesting these days, is very similar. Everywhere there is this combination of fed-upness, of hope, of the language that you have used, how we deal with, for instance, what you mentioned, Professor, the follow-up in terms of the economic deal after a peace agreement. If that's negative, people don't have a job or food, it becomes negative, and the peace agreement itself becomes part of polarization. So there are all kinds of these elements that are hidden behind these principles. I just wanted to mention to Hiba, if I may, in view of the discussion we had this morning, they're exactly the points that were just mentioned. I would want to add maybe 2 things. One is everybody talks about inclusivity. And the question is, for instance, in this region, how can we actually, I was just talking to you over lunch, the whole issue how women in northern Kivu, we can say, yes, it should be inclusive for them, but not many people are talking to you except when you are invited once and then you can leave and everybody has heard you. So there has to be a link between not only the peace processes, but also the political representation in the whole process that moves on. So I think that's an important part of the discussion here.
Thank you, Bert. And you know, one thing that quite a lot of the different actors we've talked to, and when I say actors, because it's hard to pinpoint, because we haven't really been talking only to peaceful actors. We've been also talking to non-state armed actors. We've been talking to different groups. And spoilers, you know. But, you know, in some cases, when you talk to different constituencies, they say, but we were not part of the process. Peace is done to us. it's not done with us, and we don't, we don't necessarily own it. And I went back to Palestine this summer, and on my first day, I spent 12 hours trying to get a permit to be able to move. Talk about, apartheid at times. But, in a way it was, we cannot move between cities. So I needed to go for 12 hours to get a permit so I can move between the different cities. And I was thinking that, one of the kind of terms of Oslo was around security coordination. If anyone had two thoughts about dignity of populations, they would have not agreed to these kind of terms, which actually deprive you of any basic sense of dignity, because it's basic freedom of movement even within the same, within the Palestinian authorities. So in so many ways, the idea of the principles, and this is what I really love about how we've been doing this in reconciling the realpolitik, the real society, the evidence, is that we need to unpack and really talk about some of the key, going back to the basic, around some common values, and have dialogue around this, because sometimes we're losing that perspective quite significantly at the international level, and at the time when the whole narrative is so polarized globally, it's something that is really, really needed at this point of time. But going back to your question and your comment, Fred, around this, the fear to speak up, I think why we keep saying 7 principles and then they became 8. The issue of the principle on accountable security was actually speaking to the heart of this issue, that there needs to be a minimum level of conditions, an atmosphere of security for any of these other things to happen, because you can't build a pluralistic society if there's no basic security. You can't really achieve legitimacy of a peace process without having security. But the question is that at the heart of the question of legitimacy, at the heart of the healthy state-society relationship, at the heart of the social contract, is the question of accountability, and that this, that the issue of security does not become a panacea for a complete crackdown. But so I think what's quite interesting is to see these principles as a whole coming together, as interlinked, rather than to take them separately. I don't know if anyone has any reactions. Please go ahead, and then we'll come to you.
My question in French? Okay. Oui, merci beaucoup pour la présentation. Moi, c'est par rapport, vous avez dit que quand on veut comprendre un conflit et pour le résoudre, il faut aussi comprendre l'histoire. L'histoire compte. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé pour mieux intégrer un conflit, essayer de le résoudre. Mais le problème que je vois, un exemple du Burundi. Nous, on est dans un pays où à un moment, on apprend l'histoire du Burundi, mais jusqu'à une certaine époque. Après, il y a un blackout, on ne sait rien. On apprend l'histoire sur la monarchie, mais à un moment, il y a un blackout, on ne sait plus. C'est comme si à un moment, l'histoire du Burundi s'est arrêtée, mais ce n'est pas arrêté pour autant. C'est parce qu'on n'arrive pas à s'entendre sur une certaine période de l'histoire du Burundi. Alors, comment travailler là-dessus, si déjà il y a une partie de l'histoire qu'on ne connaît pas? Et le problème, c'est que cette partie-là de l'histoire, comme les Burundais, justement, moi, je ne la connais pas, je la connais par des on-dit, et c'est beaucoup de Burundais qui sont dans ce cas. Comment vous allez travailler là-dessus si déjà c'est une partie de l'histoire qui n'est pas connue et qui, certainement, comment je vais la raconter, elle va être différente de la manière dont de l'autre côté va la raconter, elle sera biaisée, il y aura la mauvaise foi parce que justement on a vécu des histoires, les traumatismes et les conflits que nous avons vécus font qu'elle sera racontée, l'histoire du Burundi, d'une manière qui est différentes. Alors, comment vous pouvez travailler dans des conditions pareilles? Merci.
All right. Thank you so much, Hiba. when Fred was talking about mental health, is one thing that I have started taking personal of recent. We cannot talk about peace when we've not healed the society. You know, I speak about this passionately and painfully because I am a product of breakdown of mental health. My mother has schizophrenia, and I have gotten myself breaking down and getting psychotic episodes because of sometimes of the work that I'm doing. And I don't want to pass that on to my children or to the people that I work with. So for me, I want to add that it's important we have these conversations, and it's very important that we really consider adding mental health into our peace work. I want to share something small. In South Sudan, we don't have a mental institute in the whole country. We only have 2 psychiatrists, one lady and one gentleman. And even when you want to go to a mental institute, when you have a mental problem, they will tie you down and they will chain you up. And for me, seeing that breaks my heart. And I work with survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. My organization is called Crown the Woman, South Sudan, and we work with survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. And sometimes when a woman shares a story of rape and she breaks down, and you ask yourself, where do I take this woman? You know? And then us who are doing the peace work, Hiba, you mentioned peace is continuous. We need to continue doing this work. It's also, it's worth it, you know, but it's also involves a lot of sacrifice. So when a survivor comes to me and she has broken down, I ask myself, where do I take her? Because there's no mental institute in South Sudan. So for me, it's very important that we really add up mental health into our conversations and in moving forward from this conversation as well. Thank you.
Oui, je m'appelle Aboubakr Machimango, parce que vous n'étiez pas là quand je me suis présenté. On a discuté toute la journée. Oui, évidemment, il y a une question qui a été oubliée et qui n'a pas été évoquée du tout, c'est la justice. La justice criminelle. Parce que, est-ce qu'on peut sacrifier la justice en faveur de la paix? Bon, je sais bien que c'est la question de la poule et de l'œuf dans ce domaine-là, mais ça mérite aussi d'être posé parce que quand on parle de victimes, on parle aussi de responsabilités et de culpabilité qu'il faudra assumer. Et aussi, il ne peut pas y avoir de réparation sans justice. Bon, tout à l'heure, on a entendu le précédent panel en ce qui concerne la réparation des victimes. Et il y a plusieurs processus de réparation, outre la restitution, etc. Il y a aussi la réhabilitation. Et parmi la réhabilitation, il y a ce suivi en termes de résilience et d'accompagnement. Et je me pose la question, comment dans le cadre vous envisagez de lutter contre la culture de l'impunité? Parce que aussi, il y a le principe de non-répétition. Le principe de non-répétition sur lequel on doit veiller. Comment on peut veiller à ce principe de non-répétition? Parce qu'on a vu dans l'histoire du Burundi particulièrement, il y a eu des différentes étapes qu'on appelle dans le temps de l'héritage, je dirais le temps cyclique, ou de retour, donc la yonne. Et comment éviter ces cycles qui proviennent chaque 10 ans, chaque 20 ans de violence, de rupture de la paix, et si on ne parvient pas à mettre en place le mécanisme de lutter contre l'impunité, tout en préservant l'harmonie sociale et les droits des victimes. C'était ça ma question en fait.
Merci beaucoup. Partant de l'exemple de la Palestine, par exemple, et du Burundi, du Congo et du Rwanda, est-ce que vous ne trouvez pas qu'il y a un problème quand, par exemple, vous vous réveillez un matin, il y a eu carnage, il y a 100 morts, et le lendemain, business as usual. Je reviens sur ce que vient de dire mon ami, c'est l'impunité. Donc c'est comme s'il n'y avait rien eu, il y a eu quelque chose, et toute une journée paralysée, et le lendemain, on est dans des enquêtes qui n'en finissent pas. Quels sont les mécanismes qui peuvent être mis en place pour ne plus jamais ça, et pour que les gens ne revivent pas les mêmes cycles? Parce que je vois par exemple en Palestine, au Proche-Orient, ils ont toujours ce problème-là, et ça devient, on dirait une bis repetitas, où il y a ça, et puis il faut riposter, donc ça devient quelque chose où c'est comme si on ne connaît pas la cause, ou même si on connaît la cause, no one wants to cure that cause. Et c'est là où il y a un problème. Quels sont les mécanismes que vous pensez qui peuvent être mis en place pour éviter pour que les gens ne trouvent pas que c'est normal, que les gens continuent à s'entretuer? Merci.
Great. I have some reactions, but then I will pass to also to Bert and Fred to complement from where they see it. But I see a thread here. You know, there's one thread which is really around how do we move forward if we have not dealt with the past, and how do we bring that in? And I think this is something that was actually a common thread in the different consultations that we've done. And part of the response to this is actually the fundamental recalibration that we need to do when we think about peace, that it's not really that moment of the agreement. Because in many cases, what we see, what drives the whole toolbox is an assumption that, you know, you have violence, you get an agreement, you broker a power sharing arrangement in that agreement, and then, you know, you chart a path to political transition, and then magically, you know, state-society relationships are healthy, and the election is bestowing legitimacy on the elected population, and the common good is there, and then there's also a lot less focus on implementation. What we see globally is that only a third of peace agreements are actually implemented. Most of peace agreements are not implemented. And even in countries that the peace agreements are considered to be quite successful, when you talk to the populations, like for example in Bosnia or in Guatemala, they say they've actually institutionalized corruption, they've you know, entrenched clientelism, and you hear all of these different points. So a fundamental thing is really to kind of reconfigure this idea that it's actually the job of those who are engaging around peace is actually around that moment of the peace agreement, and then after that it's just, you know, business as usual and development and type of work. But then the other point that I actually feel quite strongly about is that this is what we're coming up with is not the holy grail. It's not a prescription, because actually one of the biggest issues in the current system is the assumption that there is a prescription, that there is a toolbox, and really there isn't, because context really matters, and history really matters, and the dynamics between the population really matters, and it has to be contextual, and it has to be based on what works for that country. So what we're trying to come up with is actually a guiding framework for action, something that is part of the calculus of decision makers when they're making decisions, but something that can actually be used for bottom-up pressure when it's needed to call out bad decision-making, that there is a standard and that standard has not been followed. And this is really what this is about. It's not, we're not claiming that we have the solution or the prescription for conflict, but actually more of a guiding framework. And again, on the issue of the societal healing, on the issue of, you know, trauma healing, I think the strong focus on the social capital that we really keep emphasizing in the covenant around rebuilding state-society relationship is really fundamental to that. And it's at the heart of the issue of legitimacy and how we talk about legitimacy. Because if you're not dealing, if the society is not dealing with these issues, it's very, very hard for those who are in power to have the legitimacy with the population that is not feeling that they are heard. So this is how we're dealing with this issue. And the question of justice is really there throughout. It's threaded across the different parts of the covenant. And I'm not going to go to talk about how do you deal with impunity. I grew up with it. But what I can say is that, and this is what I said before, it's urgency, it's fed-upness, it's hope. Because if we surrender to a very pessimistic view that, you know, it's completely outside of our control, then, you know, there's a problem. We need to actually push now more than ever to have dialogue around the need to reunite around common values. Because I think those of us who are also sitting across different dialogues see that as much as there is calls for respect and reciprocity coming, for example, from the South, and, you know, a lot of, for example, you know, talk about hypocrisy. There's also a lot of risks that are happening in the North, because there's also a lot of populism. There's demand for leaders to withdraw. You know, you have taxpayers who are saying, well, we are not getting benefits to our investment. We keep pouring money on this conflict and that conflict, and why do we keep doing that if it's also not even appreciated? So we need like this more constructive dialogue on basis of partnerships. And it's really both ways at this point of time. And I say that as someone who comes from a country that is, you know, kind of south, east, south. But I mean, it's a reality. We need that constructive exchange now more than ever, because the challenge is very, very big. And we can't go for polarity. But back to you, Bert, and Fred, if you'd like to react on anything, or if you think cover them.
The middle one, thank you very much. Well, first of all, the most important is from your contribution so far is what we can use in the way we're going to work, in terms of, you know, we're recording this is part of the research we do in many countries around the issues that you have been discussing. I think it's important to say that. In that sense, it's not questions and answers, but I have a few just remarks on what has been said. Look, I think first of all, on this whole issue of trauma, I would just underline with all of you, with all its contextuality, it's really, you know, in the North Kivu or here, or what we heard this afternoon around the discussion in Burundi, it is very context specific, but at the same time we realize there is a complete underinvestment on mental health care. I think that's an enormous problem. I think you mentioned it personally. You know, that's extremely appreciate you do that. First of all, people have to be able to speak out, to vomit, as somebody said. I thought it was a great remark. But after the vomit, it's not over. It helps. And I think when we look to the investment in mental health care, community workers that have a mental background, you don't even have to talk about big psychiatric hospitals. It's more about community building, including people who have knowledge on this. By the way, medication might be important on this. So when we talk about the WHO or the local, you know, investment in the medical services, this is absolutely a crucial element. And I think it's not only underinvested, it's underrated, and it's directly related to everything that has been said about how you create and chart a road for the future. Because that's the second element. I won't talk too much about truth and reconciliation, because I think you all here know much better than I know. I know that in my own country we are now only talking, after 60 years, about what we have done to the Indonesian people in the battle for decolonization. The war with Germany in Europe, we already, my generation, my parents couldn't talk about it. We didn't go on holiday to Germany. Can you imagine that now? It's ridiculous. It's now a relatively democratic country. Well, relative in terms of I don't mean it in the sense compared to Finland, for instance, but really in terms of everything is relative at the moment. You see an enormous amount of a younger generation there also that wants to have more say about environmental policy, about public goods, and so on and so forth. That brings me to a point that Hiba brought up. I think there is a chance now, and maybe I say that with a certain amount of naivete, because we have an enormous amount of inequality in the world, between countries and inside countries. And the poverty of the nation we're in today is staggering in terms of poverty levels. Nevertheless, I see a momentum in all our conversations everywhere in the world that there is a new generation that stands up for similar principles around equity, the environment, other types of engagement with politics than so far. This element of fed upness. That has to get a productive road as well for the future, and that is important. And I think, I worked in the peace agreement and the follow-up in Ivory Coast, which was a very complex problem. I think somebody touched upon it this afternoon. One thing is for sure, that any peace agreement, and again it's a process, you need a coalition of people who feel responsible to implement it. And that's actually everybody. And that's the change that has to be made. Last point I wanted to make, because so much more concrete to say about all this, is about social contract and accountable stability. Nice words, but what do they mean in practice? I'm deeply convinced that we can do much more in the world, nationally, locally, in building what you mentioned is a social contract. I don't know any place where the voice of people has not been enhanced unless in the reconstruction of a country it was locally built, it was locally accountable, and people could get together behind the type of economic activities that were necessary. Jobs, I mean, in 2011 already, we're talking about this for ages. It's jobs and security that people want. That's the key. And of course there are many other priorities, but sometimes you have to prioritize. And I think it's important that we think about that much more. People can talk endlessly about politics and peace agreement and so on. There are avenues to do that. There's a lot of knowledge around it. The private sector should be involved, a young generation of entrepreneurs, but they should get the room from the people in politics to open up. Let's be open about it. In many of our countries, it's a small group that determines the exchange rate, that determines the licenses, that determines the mining arrangements. That's the basis of our problems. And I think, therefore, in our work, that is a crucial element. How to do that, how to find the best ways to do this, how to co-create in each country the realities that are useful there. The last point is about accountable stability. And here, my brother, who is the host here, knows much better. But I was actually very interested, now we come here, where there is a very serious, I think, positive possibility. We spoke about it too. Is there something in the East African community that can maybe help to stabilize, energize security, human security for people in Eastern Congo? Now, what we know from all this, and that's why this has been deeply discussed, by the way, by somebody who had a mental health problem, namely General Dallaire, the Canadian general who is member of our commission, who is very active, who was the force commander of the UN troops in Rwanda, and who was so frustrated with the international community and with the United Nations. And with his work, he couldn't protect the people, he had to leave. That he got a trauma, and he's very open about it, by the way. He sits in our commission and makes his mandate is that this should never happen again. He works with child soldiers, with youth, with women, and so on and so forth. But having said all this, the key element is now how we relate, I think also in this region, and it's in all regions, this accountable stabilization with the voice of you. Because you don't want to be only heard when you're sitting in this room, but make sure that there is a political angle and a political inclusive angle to the possibilities of do something in human security. It's maybe, but here I'm getting on the field of my distinguished boss here, and it's maybe the bridge to give you the floor.
I just wanted to tell you why I joined this commission on inclusive peace. And today, actually, when Hiba was talking, I was reminded why I joined it. Has it ever happened to you when you're watching the news or you're on social media looking at what people are writing, and then you ask yourself, has the world gone bananas? You have, right? All of us. the normalization of intolerance, we are accepting what we should not be accepting. And I think that when I was approached to join the commission, the one thing that really struck me was, can I make a difference? Initially, it was very fuzzy for me. And I remember thinking to myself, but what is this exactly? But then slowly, as we engage in consultations and with different people, different cultures, it became clear to me. Hiba talked about the values, dignity, humility, solidarity, and some of these things. And I think that what we need is, we have figured out what is missing. What we need is, how do we amplify those voices? And for me, there is a reason why we invited certain people here. Hiba, you were not here. Here you have people from all walks of life. You have people from the religious community, you have people from the media, you have people from private sector, some of them who have never heard about some of these things. But it's because I believe that each and every one of them can actually play a role. And my wish here is, I think we have really captured it pretty much, but we need noisemakers about this. People who push back against a certain set of things that are happening and that are being amplified by right-wingers, extremists out there, and really get back to basics. So that's what I wish, and that's what I want to say came out from Africa. Let's amplify the voices of reason. That's pretty much what I'm just trying to say. And no one, more than anyone else, actually know what the devastation of war is all about, like people here. This is a region which has known genocides, this region here. So we know what it means, and I think that's a powerful thing for us to be the ones who can amplify this. So that's what I want to keep.
Great. Just adding 2 points. Since this area of work really is something that affects the lives of 2 billion people around the world, it really cannot be left to technocrats who are taking this as a profession. It needs to go back to the people. And I think this is at the heart of why, when we're thinking about the Peacemaking Covenant as a pressure tool, we need to build a movement around peace, because it's not, there's a lot of cynicism around the possibility even of peace in many places that are going through these cycles. So we really need to bring this back to the people. We need to generate a movement around this, so we can position it as a pressure point. Because when we leave it to the technocrats, what happens is that if you look at how financing is structured, it's as if Monday is stabilization, Monday is humanitarian, Tuesday is stabilization, Wednesday is development. But in the life of a person who's living in Mali, that's not how it works, right? So, and I think when we see conflict also more and more protracted, so we need really to reclaim this agenda around a set of common values, set of principles, around standards, because Fred talked about looking at the news and thinking the world has gone bananas. But I will ask, what's the definition of insanity? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing again and again and expect different results. And I think in this space of work, we've done the same thing again and again from one country to another and expected different results. So it's time to kind of create a push. But in order to do that, we need to influence the practice, we need to influence financing, so we can affect also incentives. And we need to create this strong alliance of advocates and have the right kind of dialogue around this. So what I'd like to conclude from our side with is to say, think about this overnight. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts tomorrow, because we need to do this together. And I think when we've discussed with Fred, coming together here is actually to think about, how do we take this forward in the next stage? How do we position this as a catalyst for the right kind of dialogue, so we can reunite around common values, the right kind of dialogue and pressure, so we can breathe new life into the peace agenda, and the right kind of catalyst that can shift potentially the practice, the incentives, and the financing, so we can actually stop making the same mistake, but really focus on the things that really matter, the tangible benefits to the communities, the things that actually can make peace take hold. So thank you very much. And back to you, Fred.
Very good.
Thank you, Hiba, and thank you everybody for your participation. So today, I think we're coming to an end of today's first day. I think everybody's there's a lot of emotions and everybody's a bit tired. So tomorrow, what will happen is the way we tried to organize our program was to be able to. There will be early in the morning a visit to Burundian government officials by some of us, and then we will come back here. And what we'll do is we'll hear from different experiences from the region. So each one of you will have your own thoughts. Like Hiba said, think about it this evening, and we really want to hear each one of you. No one will escape. I will not allow anyone to escape. Each and every one of you will have to give us their thoughts, because, like I said, we have a world of insane people out there, and we need to really push back. And don't underestimate your ability to make a difference. No one is small in this world. Then what we'll do is when we come back, we have a special guest tomorrow in the afternoon, early in the afternoon. We're going to be hearing people from each one of you, but then we have a special guest in the afternoon from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Burundi.
Very good.
And they just submitted a report of about 2,000 pages. And I really, yes, 2,000 pages, which probably no one will read. But anyway, there are some key highlights. But I really want you guys to listen to him, because me listening to him was quite an experience. And then we'll have many of you will have a free day to be able to visit Bujumbura, because none of you have had a chance. Actually, we've all been stuck in the hotel. So we'll try to make it short. Some of us in the commission will continue our work. But we're going to try to make it short so that you can have time to visit Bujumbura, go by a few things, go by the lake. I'm going to see with my sister Florence there how we can organize such thing. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it light on you guys, but also for you to think and to get to know the country.
What time is start tomorrow? Here?
So here we meet. So for the rest, I think my goal will be just to be safe. I would say 10:30. 10:30 tomorrow, and that way you guys get to sleep in, breakfast and everything else. But for the rest of us, it will be a bit earlier. So I will let you know a little bit how it goes. So on that note, I want to thank you so much for today and for your participation. And please, by 10:30 tomorrow, we really need you here. I really look forward to hearing each and every one of you, and we want to hear also the keynote speaker who will come to us. I want to make sure also for your departures as well, we want to make sure that we make sure that we convey to the team early enough so that they can plan for your departure. And you've been seeing ladies wearing our traditional attire. I understand Florence wants to take a picture with some of you. For those of you who are interested in wearing our traditional attire, I won't be one of them, but the other ladies can.
And the men too?
No, Beth. No, we don't.
It would look really interesting.
But he will look very interesting. Yeah, so anyway, thank you so very much for today. Thank you for the technical team. I know they did a fantastic job, the translators and so on and so forth. So thank you, and then we'll see you tomorrow, 10:30. So I hope everybody will be here. Picture with some of you, for those of you who are interested in wearing traditional attire. But think about what Hiba told you, so that tomorrow we have the lively discussion.
And the men too?
No, Beth. No, we don't.
It would look really interesting.
But he will look very interesting. Yeah, so anyway, thank you so very much for today. Thank you for the technical team. I know they did a fantastic job.
Excuse me, for those...
Yeah, so anyway, thank you so very much for today. Thank you for the technical team. I know they did a fantastic job.
Excuse me, for those of you
who come from places where they require, I hope everybody will be here. Thank you. I don't